Hello everybody, thank you for being here. Good to be back after 2025. Today, my name is Dr. Ashwin Mehta, and I'm going to talk to you today about basically moving from 25 to 26. So in 25, the big movement was navigating disruption, and in 26, we have the world of agentic in front of us. So I'm going to talk about these two things. I am the CEO of Mehtadology, which is your strategic partner in the AI revolution. I'm not going to do any more selling than that. Let's go directly into it. So, over the last couple of months, we've had a shift in the market now where when we talk about AI, many of you will have conversations in your organizations. AI does this, AI does that, we're going to do AI, something AI, right? And when we think about AI, we used to say, well, traditional AI is machine learning, neural networks, deep learning, supervised, unsupervised learning, mathematics, code base. And then we started to pivot to this generative AI thing. We're going to make content, we're going to talk to ChatGPT, we're going to make modules and videos and all of this stuff. But in 26, we have something else. And the something else is agentic. Has anybody heard of agentic? Some people. Amazing. I'm going to talk about that. But the market maturity really is in three categories. So the traditional machine learning, neural networks, all of that is very established. It's almost a hygiene thing that you should have in your organization. The generative AI space is still moving, but it's starting to become a bit more mature. But agentic is experimental. And we need to remember that when we start to talk and think about deploying this in our organizations. Risks, benefits, all of these things are emerging. So, back to 2025, let's refresh our memories on what we were all talking about. We were all talking about disruption. The market is moving very quickly. It's difficult to keep up. How do we make sense of it? So, throughout 2025, we had basically a discussion around traditional and generative AI in basically 5 categories. Now, this diagram hasn't changed in 18 months. It's unlikely to change as we move forward because we're talking about generative AI and we're talking about traditional AI, basically. In your organizations, you might have something like this that looks a little bit like a 5-layer model. In the L&D space, are all you guys in the L&D industry, broadly? Yeah, okay. In the L&D space, you tend to have a cutoff around here. So you don't really get involved in these discussions that much. It tends to all be up here. So these discussions are your data infrastructure that your IT teams will be working with. So they'll have vector stores, they'll have data schema, they'll have data lakes, data warehouses, that kind of thing. There's the connection layer. Has anybody heard of an API? Some people, yeah? API is how applications talk to each other and map data to each other. We also have Model Context Protocol, MCP. That's how agentic structures or assistants or LLMs, reasoning capability, talks to applications. And then the third one, anybody guess what the third one is? You need 3 connectors, 3 types of connectors. Some people are thinking, I like that. You have applications talking to applications, you have applications talking to agents, and you have agents talking to agents. Okay? 3 different types of connector. That's agent-to-agent protocol, Google's thing. And we also have middleware, which you can build. The next level up, assistants. So many of you will be working with assistants. The GPTs, the co-pilots of this world, start to move into that space. But that's really SaaS, software as a service. But the middle section is where a lot of companies have been doing process automation for many years. And it's quite an established kind of thing that you can do. And this is where your processes run efficiently pretty much all the time. L&D tends not to still get involved in this space. Sometimes it does, but it's mainly the domain of IT. As we move into general solutions, software as a service, some of you folks might have used GPT, Gemini, etc., etc. These are not large language models. These are applications that use large language models as part of their capability. And maybe you're using some of these things to make modules, to make scripts, to make images, to make curriculum, etc., etc. So L&D is very hot in this space. But the thing that moves quickly is the point solution space. If you look around, I'm not going to name anybody, but you look around here, there's lots of solutions that are AI powered that do one thing, that do two things, but they're not broad-based capabilities like a Copilot or a GPT. So this is the space that moves very, very quickly, and this is the space that we talk about when we try and understand disruption. But this stuff here, the data, the infrastructure, the foundation, is starting to become basically the table stakes. This is what we expect. Every business should have this stuff in place. And when you go back to your business, you probably will talk to your IT teams, and you'll find that most of this stuff probably is in place. We're moving from data to signal. So we're not really looking at the database and the schema and the sources anymore. We're trying to look at the outputs. Outputs, outcomes, and productivity. And we're looking at having this as a deterministic core. So the difference between deterministic and probabilistic is we expect fluff from the machine because we want it to be creative. But when you look at traditional mathematics, it's not creative. You have a defined answer for the thing that you want. And that's becoming more desirable because we don't want hallucinations. We don't want error, right? So these kinds of things are becoming part of play. And there is a cost of neglect. Has anybody heard of technical debt? Yeah? So the cost of neglect is the organizational version of the technical debt. If you're not doing any of this stuff here, doing this stuff is basically futile. So that's the cost of neglect, which we need to start to think about. It gives us this kind of model for L&D, and that's the 2025 version. You make content, you stick it on a platform, you look at the data when learners interact with that content. Yeah? We're all familiar with that? And you can sprinkle AI into that. So I'm going to make my e-learning course with AI, and it's going to be quicker. Or I'm going to use search capability or some kind of recommender function in my LXP or my LMS, and it's going to be slightly quicker. And maybe I'll strap some Power BI to it, and I'll get a visualization out. It's iterative. It's fine to do that, but it doesn't give you huge productivity benefits. On this side, you can think about retrieval from databases, workflows, middleware, all of that stuff. It changes the model though. You're no longer making static content. Now you need to be building the systems that will enable your learners to ask questions. It's a chatbot thing, basically. This was the view in 2025. Transformation really looked like chatbots. And that's where we were. But right now, we have, since about 3 months ago, we have the capability to have machines do what we used to do. Has anybody looked at this? Is anybody finding this scary? If you're not, look into it more, right? But agents are machines that can go and execute tasks. They can complete actions. You can daisy chain them together to form teams. And they can be considered as a synthetic workforce. If we can consider those as a synthetic workforce, then we need to open ourselves up to the capabilities of a human workforce, a hybrid workforce, and a completely machine workforce. And that changes how we consider skills, and it changes how we consider learning. So let's go into that a little bit. So we have a continuum there. On the far side, we have our human hierarchies. That's the teams that you all know or love. We've all worked in these teams for 20, 30, 40 years. It's easy. We know what the structures are. We know John from accounting, and we know what he does. We know how he likes his coffee, right? In the middle, the augmented human. You might have heard this over the last 2 years. AI is there to augment the human, not to replace the human. We've all heard this? Yeah? That's the middle bit. And the other thing we've heard is we're not getting adoption. We're not getting the value. We're not getting the productivity. These are questions. And on the far side, we have a very different way of looking at this. One human, supported by multiple squads of agents that can all go and execute things. They have skills, they have capabilities, they have resources, they have goals, they have job descriptions, they have identity. This is the 2026 approach to agentic AI, in case anybody was wondering when I said it earlier, right? Let's go into each of these. So the first one is the human hierarchy. Human hierarchies are basically linked to cost. We have one person, we want to double productivity, we hire another person, right? When we hire that other person, we need to onboard them, we need to train them, we need to upskill them, etc. We lose information when we communicate with each other. I'm communicating with you now. Every single one of you is hearing something different, ever so slightly. Guarantee it, right? We therefore have bottlenecks on growth. We can't scale companies in the way that potentially we want to. But this leads us to an idea of linear productivity. But as L&D organizations, this leads us to do things like AI literacy programs. Are you all doing these? Yeah? You got some courses, you stick them on your LMS, they're all about AI, everybody clicks the button, everybody loves it, nobody pushes back, everybody shows up to their courses, right, etc., right? This is the kind of thing we're doing. That is okay as a baseline. But if we think about the second bit, right, we have a hybrid workforce. This is where you give everybody a Copilot license. Everybody gets a ChatGPT license. You go and buy Synthesia and Colossity, and you make a bunch of avatar videos. Whatever it happens to be that suits your organization. But in this space, the skill sets need to be different, because now you've got each and every one of you enabled with a bunch of AI tools. You haven't changed the headcount, you haven't changed the structures, you haven't changed the processes. You've added a layer of licensing, and we then expect productivity to change. It doesn't seem realistic, right? And we think about adoption because we want people to click the button. We want people to log into these systems. Again, it's not necessarily a realistic proposition to think that we are going to get value from that. We have layered cost. We also have tool fatigue, right? You've got 25 different AI tools for you to use. You get bored of it. You start to think about, is there a better way I can do this with just one tool? But this gives rise to the centaur profile. Does anybody know what a centaur is? Yeah, some nods. Okay. It's a human torso on the body of a horse from potentially Greek mythology. Now, what that means is, in the analogy for the workforce, is you have one person that's powered by the might, by the horsepower of the machine. But it's still one person working with a bunch of tools. The reason this is impactful for L&D is we need to think a little bit about how we treat that role. What are the interventions that we need to do? But this is for an augmented structure. If we move to an agentic structure, we are now decoupling cost and output, because the cost of putting an agent squad into a business is infinitely scalable. We can just throw up another few squads and get more productivity out. So we are decoupling cost and output, which is quite important. Judgment-centric leadership. The person at the top needs to be on the ball when it comes to strategy, vision, direction, what the machine squads need to do, where they need to execute, and whether or not it's ethical and responsible. Which means we have a change in how we treat our workforce, because this stuff all used to be leadership training, right? We didn't used to do this for everybody in the workforce, and now we might need to consider that. Fractal scaling means we have incremental scaling based on squads and not based on humans. And we need to think about autonomous execution. There's a meme which is, if I have 20 cups of coffee, I'm going to do stupid things more quickly, right? It's that kind of analogy in the workplace, because agents can execute in milliseconds. If somebody in your workplace is going to do something that's slightly weird, you can probably stop them, because it's going to take some time to do that. If an agent squad is going to do something weird in milliseconds, you don't have a chance to stop it. So we have a scaling of risk at the same time as a scaling of opportunity. The important thing here is that we consider our human roles differently. So everybody who was doing AI literacy training, you all nodded your heads when we said we were going to do that. You're training people in AI literacy who maybe won't be at the top of these pyramids. We need to think about org redesign as well, and how are we making sure that the right people have the right skills at the right time to make the decisions based on the information that we will add value to our business. It's not the same as training everybody, right? So, let's dig a little deeper. The centaur, who remembers that? The augmented workforce. Humans working with AI, one human powered by lots of machines, by some machines. We need to think about these things. Now, I've put some words up. I want you to be honest with yourselves. How much of this is baked into your learning and development programs right now? Have a think about it. First thing is symbiosis. If we want humans to work with machines, we want one human to work with a bunch of different SaaS tools, is that human trained, capable, skilled in differentiating between this model does these things very well, this tool does those things very well, these are the handoffs, this is the tool that I need to use for the job, or is it all experimental? Because we kind of moved past the stage of experiments now. How much does your human get involved in the polish of the end product? Because AI will produce something that's maybe 80-90% of the way there, maybe less. But how much of the skill base of the human goes into polishing? So we have these kinds of things in the symbiotic space. In the cognition space, we need to make sure that a human working with a software as a service tool can detect error, can mitigate that error, can mitigate bias, and can hold themselves accountable for the risk of the cognition side, the reasoning side of what these tools do. The interface fluency, the tool, using lots and lots of tools and being fluent with that. How many of you come from organizations where every time you have a new tool, you've got to go through a training program on using that particular tool? That kind of approach isn't scalable. It's not going to work when you have 25 different tools. So that needs to be part of the program as well. And then on the iteration side, we have, of course, domain expertise. If I'm doing chemical engineering, I need to know something about chemical engineering, versus if I'm doing marketing, I need to know something about that. And we need to think about prompt structures and code bases as well, but also knowing what's coming up. And this is all the Centaur piece. If you move then from the Centaur piece to the Puppet Master piece, now we're thinking about systemic orchestration of a business. So that is moving towards a zero-touch infrastructure where most of your business works without human intervention. Human on the loop, human oversight, not human in the loop anymore. You may have heard these different terms. So let's talk about that. Logic orchestration. How many of you have programs for your workforce about dissecting processes into their component parts, orchestrating those with orchestration platforms, or doing operations, whether we call it, we have DevOps, we have machine learning ops, we have fractal ops as well, around orchestration. This is stuff that needs to be in place if you're going to move into the agentic space. Then we have intent. So what is design? We need to think about the design of our organization, what that workforce architecture looks like if we have a synthetic workforce or a hybrid workforce. Thinking about skilling as well is very important. And then we need to think about outputs and outcomes slightly differently as well. QA is very important. The kill switch. The kill switch is the button that you push when your agents go haywire. It needs to be indicator driven rather than a human intervention. And the last one is the strategy. So we think about agentic HR, and I put a paper out about this last week, so go and read it. It's free, it's just out there. Agentic HR, we think about recruiting a person. If I recruit any one of you into my company, I'm going to want to know what your job is, what resources you need to do that job, what the outputs look like, who you report to, who your colleagues are. We need to treat agents in the same way. So we have non-human identity management, which tells us we have this specific agent for learning. They need these skills, they need these resources, this is their remit, this is how we're going to control when they go outside of their remit, and we structure all of that into our architecture to make sure that every agent is doing its job, every agent is controllable, right? And the implications of that on the skills-based organization, you may have heard of this when we think about humans having skills. The tangibility of a machine skill is a coded markdown file. It is somewhere. It sits in a drive. It's accessible by agents. When we think about a human skill, how many of you have human skill taxonomies where you might say, in one organization, the definition of communication is this, and John from accounting has scored himself 8 on a scale of 10, versus you go to a different organization, it's coded in a different way, it means something else. We don't have any kind of parity between taxonomies, which becomes a data problem. This is part of the hygiene, this is the thing that we need, and it's part of our infrastructure literacy. Again, all of these things would be in the learning and development interventions that you create if you move into the agentic space and you need a puppet master role. But what about people? I hear you cry, what about people? He's talking about machines all the time, and we don't like machines, we like people. So let's talk about people. Right, change management is a thing that I guess we all need to do. Now the tricky point that I usually make and nobody likes is if you're managing people through a change, you're managing the whole organization through a change, or really you want to focus on the people who are going to be part of your new target operating model. You got 20,000 people, your future organization looks like 5,000 people. How much effort do you put into the 15 that aren't going to be there? It's a decision for you to make. I'm not going to make that decision for you. Org redesign. Depending on where you want to be, if you want to be in the augmented space, every person has a bunch of tools. We're not going to get productivity, but everyone's going to be happy. Or we're going to move into the agentic space and we're going to focus on productivity. Your organization needs to look like whatever that is that suits your strategy. And that's not an easy conversation, but these are human skills that maybe this group, L&D and human capital and HR, are ideally placed to do, ideally placed to have those conversations. Skills, I've mentioned, machine skills, human skills, hybrid workforce skills need to also include the interface between humans and machines. So that needs to be part of your skill structures and part of your learning interventions. Ethics and responsible AI, it's the same thing as it's always been. Should you really be doing the thing that you're doing? It's up to you to think about that. Non-human identity management I also talked about. Agentic HR is an interesting one because the question's going to be, does it sit with this group or does it sit with IT? How do we define what an agent is, what the role is, what resources it has, how do we provision that? My view is it needs to sit with both. It needs to sit in a hybrid role that's not HR and not IT. Because HR has the contents of the box, but it doesn't have the box. IT owns the infrastructure and it has the box, but it doesn't know what goes in the box. So there needs to be a little bit of co-working to make this kind of thing work. Lots to think about. So key takeaways. Generative AI, traditional AI, you can think about that in 5 layers. That's quite an easy one. AI software as a service is going to give you minimal change. It's not going to give you massive adoption benefits. And frankly, when we move to agentic, we don't care about adoption anyway. Because adoption is people clicking into software. And if the software, the machines are running themselves, we don't care if people click into them, right? That means org redesign, of course. We have 2 new roles. One is the centaur and one is the puppet master. Consider in your organizations which you have. You might have a mix, that's cool. And make sure that your programs are catering for that mix. And the last one is we do still have people-focused skills when we think about agentic. It's not just about the machine. Everything that I've said, the papers that I've referenced, you can download them for free if you scan the QR code. So happy reading and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you. Questions? You got a mic? Has anybody got any? A lot of heavy stuff, stunned into silence. Laura's got one at the back.
Ash, thank you. Tell me, if we're in organisations that aren't ready for the centaur or the puppet master, how do we prepare ourselves for those types of roles to be ready for when they come?
Thank you, Laura. So preparing yourselves, this is the thing that I usually say, but I neglected to say this time, is be selfish. Think about yourself and your own job. Laura's rightly reminded me of that. Being a centaur means that you need to be considering the vast array of things that you have to augment your role, which are machine things. Making sure you have the skills that were on the slide, so going through symbiosis, through tech fluency, to make sure that you can be productive in the areas you're productive. It's not going to be the same for everybody because the tool set's going to be different, but the core principles are going to be the same. And I would urge you, it's tricky saying this in front of an L&D crowd, but Usually an organization is not going to provide you with everything you need to succeed in that role. So you need to go off and make sure that you have your own ambition, your own purpose, and your own drive to look these things up, even if your organization isn't providing for you. So that's roughly what I would say to answer that. Thank you, Laura. Any other questions? This guy over here.
So where do you go to get up to date with it? Who do you listen to? Who are you interested in? Where do you get your ideas from? Where do you bounce off in order to keep yourself ahead? Are there any other people, including yourself and your organization, that we should be listening to?
Okay, so if anybody didn't hear that, the question was, who do I go to keep up to date? First of all, start from within. I run an AI and tech consulting business. I'm not in L&D, so we're developing things, we're developing products. I have teams working with me. We're constantly on the cutting edge of trying to make sure that we have the product suite, the governance, all of the stuff in place for this. There are people in each of these areas. So if you think about what I just said, I didn't say L&D. I said the security, we have governance, we have development, we have coding, we have all of these things are being released by all the major companies, as well as there are specific thought leaders who are publishing in each of these areas. So I can give you a list at some point. You can go on.
Can you give us a couple of thought leaders? Just a couple. Who do you think's on the board?
I will message you a list, and you can go on my LinkedIn, and you can see all the people I'm following anyway.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
perfect.
No worries. Because there's a lot. I don't want to neglect anybody. You know. Any other questions? One here.
Not necessarily. Oh God, it's really loud. Not necessarily like naming any companies or anything, but do you have any examples of companies who are moving towards this agentic and what agentic AI is being used for? Because this all feels quite theoretical. What will people be doing? How will they be going from 20,000 people to 5,000 people?
Yep.
Like,
sure.
Yeah.
So there are three areas of this. One area, I'll give you my business example, right? So my business has been around for 3 years, which means we have the capability to be agentic first. That means every new thing that we do, the first question is, can it be done by machines? And if we need to hire people, we then hire, right? And it means some of the things around day rates and economics kind of go away. So in my business, I have 10 squads of agents. In all the business departments you would expect: marketing, sales, research, analysis, consulting, admin, governance and compliance. You know, we have different agents working. I have one additional person, full-time, who is standing over there, who is unique in the market because she's working with the squads. Most people aren't. I have a handful of clients in different areas, so from big tech through heavy engineering, consulting, financial services. They're all moving to this area. Consulting is moving particularly quickly. So Big Four consulting, that kind of thing, in the agentic space, because they're trying to have the traditional consulting squad structure where you have a senior, a middle, and a bunch of juniors doing different things. That is ideal for an agent squad structure. So they've moved already, and next week I'm talking on stage with Accenture around exactly this. So the consulting side is moving quickly, the financial services is moving slightly less quickly because of compliance, and they need to make sure that data is sovereign. In the learning space, nobody's moving quickly, let's face it, right? It's all still about static content. HR is moving in a hybrid way in different companies, but HR is moving towards the org redesign space. So they're trying to help their C-suite, and again, financial services mainly, they're trying to help their C-suite to try and figure out what the new designs need to be, and critically where agentic and where automation need to play in that, because it's not all about agentic. Some of it is about orchestration. The big tech companies, the ones I won't name, the big ones, right? They're moving in this space in a hybrid way, so some functions have gone completely agentic already, and that's why you see the layoffs in the market. Some functions have gone done nothing, basically. They're using some of their AI, and they're using it, not the agentic stuff, they're using software as a service, and they're using it kind of slowly. So there are lots of examples in the market. I'm not naming people deliberately, right? But there are examples in the market in different sectors. I have not worked with retail. Sorry, guys. I haven't worked with retail. So I don't really know how that's being affected, because retail tends to be a lot of face-to-face interaction in situ. So I'd have to think about that a bit more. Any more questions? No? 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much.